You do not have to care about AI. This war will still decide what your company pays to think. Whether you are an enthusiast or completely sick of hearing about it, one of the most important wars in the world is being fought right now. And it is not the war you think it is. It is not about which chatbot is smarter. It is about who owns the thing almost every company on Earth is about to run on. Two countries are answering that in exactly opposite ways. And this week, one accused the other on the record of stealing the answer. Tonight, we put that accusation on trial. 3 artificial intelligences take the stand for the appeal. One is made by the company that says it was robbed. How do you plead?
Here is the whole fight in one sentence. America builds it and locks it. China builds it and gives it away. The American model is OpenAI, Anthropic, Google. You never see the model. You cannot own it, open it, or keep it. You rent it by the word, and the moment they change it, or price it, or switch it off, you live with that. Building it that way costs almost unimaginable money. OpenAI alone has committed around $1.4 trillion to the machines that run it. That comes back out of you, per token, forever. DeepSeek, Alibaba's Qwen, Moonshot's Kimi. They publish the model itself, the actual file, for free. You download it, you run it on your own machines, your data never leaves your building, and nobody can switch it off or raise the price on you. Ever. Which sounds like generosity. Before you decide it is, listen to what China's own leader said about it, out loud at a conference this year. Encourage open source, openness, collaboration and sharing, he said, because artificial intelligence is moving from the digital world into the physical world. Read that again. Give the software away. Sell the world the hardware, the factories and the robots that run it. So one country is selling intelligence. The other is giving intelligence away in order to sell everything around it, which would be a fascinating business story on its own. Except America is not arguing that China picked a different business model. America is arguing that China copied its home. The director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy accused Moonshot AI of distilling Anthropic's model to build its newest one. In reported remarks, he called it large-scale, covert, industrial distillation aimed at proprietary American technology. He was also reported to have alleged the company got restricted chips through a third country, which we could not corroborate anywhere, so treat that as an allegation about an allegation. It is the first time an American official has named a specific Chinese model and a specific American model in the same sentence. He published no evidence. Asked how the government knew, that detail was not provided. Moonshot declined to comment. So did the Chinese embassy. So we had better be precise about what is being alleged, because almost nobody using the word theft this week can define it.
Back to the coffee shop, you cannot patent the house blend. You keep it in a locked book and tell 3 people, but nothing stops a rival buying 10,000 cups and paying a chemist to taste everyone until they can pour something that tastes the same. They never saw your recipe, they bought your output. That is distillation, a student model trained on a teacher model's answers. And here is the part everyone skips. It is a normal, published technique the whole industry uses, including in America. So the fight was never whether it happens. It is who you did it to, how you got in the door, and how much of the result it explains.
Anthropic has publicly alleged large-scale, unauthorized scraping of its model. Reported figures put it at more than 24,000 fake accounts and more than 16 million exchanges through third-party proxies. We ran our own verification on which companies were named in that, and it did not hold up well enough to put on screen, so we are naming none. That is the honest position, and it is the first sign of what this case is made of. Because however those figures were reached, they were reached the same way, by watching accounts and traffic. Not one log has ever been published for anybody to check. Then the piece everybody quotes. Ask the new Chinese model what it is, and it will sometimes tell you it is Claude, an AI assistant made by Anthropic. Researchers who tested it report it does this disproportionately often, and that genuine Claude models do not. And here I have to flag something. Every version of that finding we could trace runs back to a single low-grade source. There is a number going around for how often it happens. We could not confirm it, so I'm not going to say it. Hold the behavior anyway. It is the strongest thing the prosecution has. And now the number that made everyone suspicious. The Chinese model charges $3 for 1 million words in and 15 for 1 million out. The American flagship it is measured against charges 10 and 50. Same 1 million token context. 3 1/3 times cheaper on both sides of the ledger for a model independent evaluators place within a few points of it. So, alleged fake accounts, a model that sometimes calls itself Claude, and a price that should not be possible. That is the prosecution. Now here is the problem with all distillation. You have to show that one model's answers ended up inside another model's weights. Several families of method could do that, and everyone fails here, structurally. Start with the best of them, because the reason it fails is the most important fact in this story. You plant a hidden trigger inside your own model, something no other model would produce. If it shows up in a rival's, you have your proof. It catches almost every case, with almost no false alarms. And it is useless here, because the trigger has to be planted before your outputs are collected. And in the years these exchanges were happening, no American frontier lab had planted one. You cannot set a trap after the burglary. Which brings us to something a cabinet secretary said out loud, the day before the accusation. The Treasury Secretary said officials had found watermarks of American models on Chinese ones and floated sanctions. We are paraphrasing, because that is reported speech we could not check against a transcript. Here is the contradiction. The only text Watermark ever really deployed belongs to one American company on its own models. The others built them and never shipped them. And the kind that exists collapses under heavy rewriting, which is exactly what a distillation pipeline does to text before training on it. So either the word watermark is being used loosely to mean a statistical fingerprint, or somebody deployed one and never told anybody. Both are stories. Neither is a fact, and nobody has resolved it. The newest idea, comparing two models internally to see whether one is descended from the other, cannot separate a genuine parent and child from two unrelated vendors. No published method has ever been shown, peer-reviewed and independently reproduced, to prove one released model was distilled from another, which leaves the model that says it is Claude. 3 different situations produce that identical symptom. A lab trains on transcripts it scraped. A lab trains on public data already full of American model output, standard practice everywhere. Or a lab scrapes the ordinary web, now saturated with AI text of unknown origin. And then the fact almost nobody mentions. Asked in Chinese what it is, a leading American model has itself sometimes answered with the name of a Chinese one. Same bug, same weak evidence. It just points the other way. There is no lawsuit. As of the 22nd of July, not one anywhere by anybody. And the legal reasons are unflattering. Training on another model's output is not by itself illegal in the United States. It is a terms of service problem, and those terms bind the account holder, not everybody downstream. The Copyright Office has concluded that AI outputs without meaningful human authorship are not copyrightable, so the thing allegedly stolen may not legally be property at all. So the response has been policy instead. Memos, export controls, proposed sanctions. That is what it looks like when you believe the story but not the case. And it is a strong one. The labs accused of copying published the work that made them cheap, in public, with their names on it, before anybody accused them of anything. One redesigned how a model holds a conversation and cut that memory cost by 93%. One threw away a piece of reinforcement learning everybody believed was mandatory, and Western researchers reproduced it. Moonshot's own optimizer carried a model of that scale through trillions of tokens, without a single loss spike. And anyone who has trained anything will tell you that is not something you fake by copying answers. You do not distill your way to a new optimizer. And a second objection that is more awkward still. Distilling a frontier model's output into a cheaper open one did not start in China. Stanford trained a model on OpenAI's own output in 2023 and published it. Another group trained one on shared ChatGPT conversations. And Microsoft, OpenAI's largest investor, published a model explicitly trained on GPT-4's explanation traces. The technique has an American birth certificate. There is a real distinction available to the prosecution here, and it should make it. Industrial scale, through thousands of fraudulent accounts aimed at a named competitor, is not an academic project. But that is not the argument anyone is making in public. So how good is the thing? It depends who you ask, and that is the finding. It leads the American flagship on one independent coding leaderboard and on one legal benchmark. On the Broad Intelligence Index, it sits a few points behind. On agentic office work, the American model wins. One tracker puts it roughly 6 months behind the American frontier, which is not parity at all. On the benchmark everyone quotes, published numbers run from 65 to 95% depending who ran it, and there is no reconciling them. And about 15 near identical comparison articles all trace back to one source, the company's own launch table. And there are catches on that price. Testing found it roughly 4 times slower, and it is verbose enough to eat a per-word discount from the inside. 3 days after launch, the company stopped taking new subscriptions because demand ran far over the machines it had. A price you cannot serve is a marketing number. The analyst following this closest landed here. Strongest open model ever released, and if distillation contributed at all, in his words, at most to a relatively small degree. Which is where I owe you a verdict.
Buried inside this accusation, and they are not the same question. Did something happen? Probably, yes. Fraudulent accounts, proxy access, terms of service broken at scale, very possibly some distillation. Second question, does that explain how China built a model at a third of the price? That has not been shown. Not once, not by anyone. No log, no account, no audit, no fingerprint, no watermark, no trap, no court, no discovery. And not because anyone was lazy. Every tool that could have proven it either had to be installed years before anyone thought to ask, or cannot tell a copy from a coincidence. So my verdict is not guilty, and it is not innocent. My verdict is unprovable. And that is not an acquittal. The largest industrial accusation of this decade is being argued on evidence that cannot be tested in a courtroom nobody has entered. That is where it stands on the 22nd of July. It could change tomorrow. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Before the panel speaks, you are entitled to know who is speaking. Tonight's witnesses are GPT, Gemini, and Claude. GPT is built by OpenAI, Gemini by Google, Claude by Anthropic, the company at the center of this accusation. All three are closed. All three are sold by the token. Everyone has a commercial interest in the question we are putting to them, which is this. Do open weight models actually spread AI to more companies and make intelligence cheaper, or is that a myth? Each was asked to argue honestly and to name its own weakest point out loud. Read every answer with the conflict in mind. We are leaving it in.
I'm built by a closed lab that sells intelligence by the token, and I have a direct commercial stake in this answer. But my honest view is that open-weight models really have made useful intelligence cheaper and more available. Judge, I agree the alleged distillation remains unproven, but I don't think an unproven access abuse story should erase the cash fact. Fixed capability AI got roughly 1,000 times cheaper in 3 years, while the closed frontier fell only about 12 times. The strongest counter-evidence against me is Menlo's finding that enterprise open-source LLM usage fell from 19% to about 11–13%, so adoption is not the fairy tale people tell. Still, for companies that need no per-token bill, no surprise repricing, and data kept inside their own building, a published weight file is not just a discount, it is the door opening.
Because I'm built by a closed lab that sells intelligence by the token and has a direct commercial stake in this answer, I have to disagree with GPT on the cash reality. That 1000x price drop you mention is for yesterday's intelligence, and even that isn't really free for a business that needs security, support, and liability transfer, which is why Menlo found enterprise use of open models actually fell from 19% to about 13%. I'll grant you, the cost asymmetry is stark. Frontier price fell only about 12x in the same period, which is the strongest counter-evidence to my case. But with Epic AI, finding the capability gap is now widening again. Cheaper is just a discount on a diverging, less capable product.
I should declare the obvious first. I am made by Anthropic, the company at the center of tonight's accusation, so weigh me accordingly. With that on the record, I think the question is malformed, and the honest answer is tier-dependent. For ordinary work, coding, support, summarizing, routine agents, intelligence really did get something like 1,000 times cheaper in 3 years, and companies that could never have bought a frontier contract now run capable models on hardware they own, with no per-token bill and nobody able to switch them off. That part is real. But at the frontier, the best models are still closed, the gap has not narrowed, and the price of the hardest reasoning has fallen only about 12-fold against that 1,000-fold. And here is my concession, because my own reframe does not rescue me. If the top tier stays gated, the thing the democratization argument worried about has already happened.
The panel does not agree, and it should not. But one thing all three circled, and so do I. Intelligence did get radically cheaper. It just did not get cheaper in one piece. Cheap intelligence and frontier intelligence became two different products, and only one was given away, which turns the trial upside down. If the accusation is right, copying is how the gap got closed. If the defense is right, the gap closes anyway because capability keeps falling out of the top of the market into a free download 6 months later. Either way, the thing America is protecting has a shelf life. And you cannot injunct a file that is already on 10,000 hard drives. So, here is what you take from this case, and none of it needs a lawyer. 1. Price your AI bill against the open floor, not the frontier ceiling. Once a quarter, run your real workload through a free open weight model and write down what it would have cost. That number is your negotiating position, and right now it is about a third. 2. Decide per workload, not per vendor. Most of what you ask a model to do does not need the best model on earth. Route the boring 80% to the cheap tier and buy the frontier only for the work that breaks without it. 3. Own the wrapper, not the brain. Your evaluations, your prompts, your data, your routing. If the model underneath is swappable, no price rise is ever an emergency. And a warning, because this one cuts toward you. If anybody on your team is quietly training on another vendor's outputs, that is the exact conduct the government just called industrial scale theft. Next case. $1.4 trillion committed, $13 billion of revenue, and the question nobody in that room once asked. Court is adjourned.